Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to NK Cheating Story. We truly appreciate every single one of you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. I always thought the silence between us was just the comfort of familiarity. 12 years of marriage does that. You run out of new stories, stop asking about each other's day, and fall into a rhythm. Predictable, steady, and quiet. But now, as I look back, I realize that silence wasn't comfort. It was distance. It was secrets. And it was the sound of my wife's betrayal echoing through the walls of the life we built together. My name is Ryan Maddox. I'm 38, a financial advisor in Midtown Manhattan. I'm not flashy, not the kind to draw attention, but I've always been proud of my work, my house, and most of all, my marriage. Sophia, my wife, was everything I thought I ever wanted. Smart, elegant, magnetic. She worked in healthcare administration, a demanding job, but she somehow made it all look effortless. People always said we were the perfect couple. God, how I wish that had been true. It started small. Little things. She stopped asking me to join her for her evening jogs. Her phone, once carelessly left on the kitchen counter, was suddenly always in her purse. She wore perfume to the gym. And the sex, sporadic, distant, like she was somewhere else even when she was with me. But I ignored it. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe it. I told myself she was tired, overworked, that we were just going through a rough patch, that it was on me. I needed to be more romantic, more attentive, more present. Then came the Monday morning that changed everything. It was early, just past 6. I was backing out of the driveway to catch the 6:45 train to the city. We live in a quiet suburb in Long Island, the kind of place where nothing bad ever seems to happen. I glanced up at the garage door to make sure it had closed. 2 weeks ago, I forgot to check, and Sophia scolded me like I was a child. Said she didn't feel safe, that anyone could walk in while I was gone. I had apologized, promised to be more careful. This time, I watched the door until it latched. Then I pulled away. Halfway to the station, a country song came on. One of those bittersweet ballads about a man losing his wife to someone else. Normally, I would have laughed it off, changed the station. But the lyrics, it was like they were pulled from my own life. She's gone, but she smiles like nothing happened. I couldn't shake it. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, my chest grew heavy. That nagging suspicion I'd been burying for weeks clawed its way to the surface. I made it to the city, sat through a morning full of meetings, but I wasn't there. Not really. My mind kept circling the same thought. What if she was cheating? What if my gut wasn't just anxiety? What if I was being played like a fool in my own home? When I got home that night, something was off. Sophia was in the kitchen, humming, cooking like nothing was wrong. That same damn perfume clung to her like a red flag. I kissed her cheek, cold. She smiled, but her eyes were elsewhere. Long day? She asked, stirring the pasta sauce. Yeah, yours. Productive, she replied. Oh, by the way, I might have to go to Miami next week for a work conference. Just a few days. My boss wants me to attend a healthcare innovation summit. I nodded, pretending I wasn't immediately suspicious. Miami, huh? That's a bit far for a few days. Yeah, but it's a big deal. Derek, my supervisor, is going too. We'll be presenting some of our department's metrics. Derek Lawson. I had met him once. Charismatic. Always smiling too much. The kind of guy who talked with his hands and stood too close to your wife. Something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. That's nice, I said calmly. But inside, a storm was starting to brew. That night, while Sophia showered, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. She had 3 numbers saved under initials. DH, DO, and DW. All with the same area code. I clicked DW. Derek's voice greeted me in his voicemail. She'd labeled his personal, office, and hotel numbers under different aliases. My hands trembled as I placed the phone back exactly as I found it. My stomach churned. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing every creak of the house, imagining every lie she'd told, every touch that wasn't mine. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was damning. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real. And I was done being the clueless husband. Something was happening, and I was going to find out exactly what. The next morning, I couldn't even look Sophia in the eyes. She moved around the kitchen like everything was fine, humming some pop song as she poured herself coffee. I watched her from across the table, trying to convince myself that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was letting suspicion twist reality. But then she mentioned Derek again, casually, like he hadn't just been the voice on the other end of her phone in the middle of the night. Derek wants me to finalize the presentation slides before the flight, she said, buttering her toast. He's a perfectionist. I forced a smile. When do you leave? Friday morning. JetBlue, 10:30 a.m. I'll be staying at the Victor Hotel in South Beach. Derek booked everything. Said it's a great place to network. I nodded, sipping my coffee, pretending her words didn't sound like nails scratching down a chalkboard. I could practically see the affair unfolding already. Tropical heat, champagne-soaked bedsheets, stolen glances by the pool. I was done pretending. I took the rest of the day off work. Called in, said I had a personal emergency. Howard, my boss, gave me his usual gruff nod over the phone and told me to handle whatever it was. He didn't ask questions, and I was thankful for that. By noon, I had a plan. I drove into the city and found a discreet spy tech shop tucked between a pawn store and a laundromat in Brooklyn. I felt ridiculous walking in, like I was playing some B-grade detective in a bad movie. But the man behind the counter didn't judge. He sold me 3 voice-activated recorders, a miniature parabolic microphone, and a camcorder small enough to fit into the palm of my hand. Cash only. I went home and began planting the recorders, one in the bedroom lamp, another in the living room near the phone, and one in her car under the driver's seat. My hands shook the entire time. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed the truth. If she was cheating, I wanted to hear her admit it. I wanted proof, cold, undeniable, and damning. By Friday morning, I had what I needed. The recorder in the living room picked up a phone call Thursday night. Her voice was hushed, but clear. Sophia, Derek, are you packed? I know, I'm excited too. This trip couldn't come at a better time. Ryan's been distant. He suspects something, I think. Derek, then we better be careful. Are you sure he doesn't know about us? Sophia, not yet. But if he finds out, this whole thing blows up. Derek, don't worry. A few more days in Miami, and we'll be planning something more permanent. I stopped the recording, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. Permanent. They were planning something permanent. That wasn't a fling. That was a replacement. The next morning, I insisted on driving Sophia to the airport. She tried to tell me Derek would take her, but I smiled and said I wanted to see her off. She smiled back. Tight, awkward. Guilty. On the drive to JFK, she kept glancing at me from the passenger seat. I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, to ask her again if she really needed to go. But I didn't. I just drove, gripping the wheel tighter with every mile. We arrived around 8:30 a.m., just like she planned. And sure enough, there he was, Derek Lawson, standing curbside like a damn chauffeur, smiling like the snake he was. He wore aviators, a navy button-down, and the smug confidence of a man who thought he'd gotten away with everything. Sophia kissed my cheek, then turned to Derek. He hugged her, his hand lingering too low on her back. I watched every second of it, burning it into my memory. As they walked toward security, I called out, Sophia. She turned, startled. Yes. I stepped forward, wrapped my arms around her in a tight embrace. I love you, I whispered in her ear. If anything happens, remember that. She stiffened slightly. I love you too. I let her go. She disappeared into the terminal with Derek. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had booked the next flight to Miami. Same hotel. Room 2 floors above theirs. Disguised with dyed hair, a fake beard, and sunglasses, I planned to be the ghost in the shadows. Watching, listening, waiting. This wasn't just about catching her. This was about showing her. About reminding her who I was. And what I was capable of. Let the games begin. By the time my flight touched down in Miami, my blood felt like fire in my veins. The heat, the smell of ocean air, the sound of gulls. It should have felt like a vacation. But every step I took out of the terminal felt like I was marching into war. I had no intention of relaxing. I checked into the Victor Hotel under a fake name, Marcus Lang. I'd dyed my hair black the night before, trimmed my beard to change my jawline, and wore mirrored aviators like some tourist cliché. But it worked. Even I barely recognized myself in the hotel mirror. My room was 2 floors above theirs, facing the pool courtyard. That part wasn't a coincidence. I had asked for it specifically. I tipped the concierge extra to keep quiet. Once I was in the room, I unpacked my gear. Camera, tripod, the parabolic microphone, a notepad for details, everything was ready. I stepped onto the balcony, and took a look around. The victor's pool area was lined with white loungers and umbrellas, and sure enough, by 3 p.m., I spotted them. Sophia and Derek, laughing, drinks in hand, lounging like newlyweds on a honeymoon. She wore a red bikini, one I'd never seen before, cut high on the hips and low on the chest. My gut twisted, not because of the skin she was showing, but because she wore that for him, not me. She leaned over to whisper something in his ear, and he threw his head back in laughter. Then, as if to twist the knife, he leaned in and kissed her, slow, deep, like they'd done it 100 times before. I hit the record button. My hands trembled. They didn't even try to hide it. She was sitting on his lap by the time the drinks were finished. I zoomed the lens in tighter. His hand ran up her thigh, her fingers laced behind his neck. And then, as if to confirm every sick suspicion I ever had, she kissed him again, this time with her eyes closed. I watched it all from behind the fake ferns I dragged onto the balcony to hide my setup. A voyeur in my own marriage. It was the first time I truly understood what betrayal looked like. But I needed more than video. I needed audio, words. I wanted to hear her lies, to feel the weight of them in my chest when she told him things she never said to me. The parabolic mic I'd bought picked up their voices, faint but clear, as the sun started to set and the pool crowd thinned out. Derek, you think he suspects anything? Sophia, laughing. If he did, I wouldn't be here, would I? He's clueless. Sweet, but clueless. Derek, we could just disappear, you know. You and me. Screw the consequences. Sophia, not yet. Ryan's still useful. At least until we figure things out. Useful. That word echoed in my head like a slap. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was an ATM. A stepping stone. A fool. I turned off the mic and stepped inside, unable to take more. I paced the room, heart racing, while climbing my throat. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to smash something. My fists ached for impact, but I kept them clenched. No, not yet. There was still more to do. That night, I watched them leave the hotel from the shadows of the lobby cafe. Sophia wore a low-cut black dress and heels that clicked with every step. Derek had one hand on her waist and the other casually flipping his phone. They looked like any other couple, confident, carefree. I followed them at a distance, careful, deliberate. They stopped at a seafood restaurant 3 blocks away. I waited until they were seated on the outdoor terrace before snapping a few photos with the zoom lens from across the street. Each click of the camera felt like justice. I caught her laughing, him feeding her a bite of crab, her wiping sauce from his chin with a napkin like they were some adorable, picture-perfect pair. I wanted to storm across the street and rip that table in half. But I didn't, because I wasn't here to rage. I was here to ruin them. By the time I got back to the hotel, it was close to midnight. I reviewed the footage and photos, labeled them, backed them up to the cloud. Then I sat in the dark, staring at the flickering pool lights below. She had no idea I was here. No idea I'd seen everything. And soon, I'd make sure she never forgot it. The next morning, I woke with the sun blazing through the curtains. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of a restless haze, haunted by the images of Sophia tangled up with another man. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her red bikini. I heard her laughter. I heard his voice calling me clueless. Maybe I had been, but not anymore. By 9 a.m., I was back on the balcony, the camera re-angled toward their room. Their curtains were still drawn, but eventually I saw movement, silhouettes crossing back and forth. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The balcony door slid open, and out stepped Derek in nothing but a hotel robe, cigarette dangling from his lips like some smug victory flag. A minute later, Sophia joined him, also in a robe. She walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, laying her cheek against his back like they'd been doing this for years. Then she whispered something, and he laughed again. That damn laugh. I started recording. Then, clear as day, she said, "Think you've got another round in you, stud?" He grinned. "Maybe. Give me 30. She smirked, kissed him on the neck, and they went back inside. My grip tightened around the edge of the balcony railing until my knuckles went white. That was it. That was all I needed. The video didn't lie. They were screwing around in broad daylight. No shame, no hesitation, just pure audacity. I could have ended it right then. Sent the video to her parents, to his wife, blown everything up in one email. But no, that would be too easy. And she didn't deserve easy. I wanted her to see what betrayal looked like from the other side. I spent the next hour reviewing footage. Every kiss, every touch, every little whisper I had captured. It all told the same story. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who didn't even bother to hide her double life anymore. Then, an idea sparked. The front desk. Carlos, the young clerk from when I checked in. Friendly, talkative, the kind of guy who'd do anything for $100 and a good story. I made my way down to the lobby. "Morning," I said, flashing my fake ID as Marcus Lang. Carlos smiled. "How can I help you, Mr. Lang?" "I was wondering," I said casually, leaning over the counter. "Who's working the desk on Saturday morning?" Carlos glanced at the schedule behind the desk. "That'd be me." "Perfect." I slipped him 2 crisp bills. "I might need your help delivering a message when I check out." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A message? Let's just say it'll make checkout unforgettable." He grinned. "I like unforgettable." I left instructions. 2 printed photos. 2 notes. One for Sophia, one for Derek. I made sure the envelopes were sealed and labeled clearly. Then I returned to my room, feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Control. Later that afternoon, I saw Sophia walking through the lobby alone, her phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear her, but from the way she paced, I knew she was talking to someone important. Probably me. I let it go to voicemail. That night, she tried calling again. Twice. I let them ring. At 10:14 p.m., she sent a text. "Jeff, please call me. I don't know what's going on. I'm worried. I love you." I stared at the message for a long time. I love you. Funny how those words mean absolutely nothing when they're soaked in lies. Still, I responded. "I'm fine. Enjoy your trip." Cold. Short. Enough to stir panic, but not reveal anything. I wanted her squirming, second-guessing, wondering if I knew. The next morning, I woke early, got dressed, and made my way to the guest computer in the hotel lobby. I printed 2 of the clearest photos, one of Sophia and Derek kissing by the pool, and another of them holding hands leaving the restaurant. I slid them into the envelopes I had prepared the night before and handed them to Carlos, who gave me a sly nod. The plan was in motion. Now, all I had to do was wait. I checked out of the hotel at noon and headed for the airport. Back home, my lawyer already had the paperwork drawn up. Divorce papers. No alimony. Proof of infidelity attached. The judge wouldn't even blink. All that was left was to let her come home. Let her walk back into the house we shared. Let her find the emptiness I left behind, and the silence that would scream louder than any words ever could. By the time I landed back in New York, I had spent every minute of the flight replaying her voice in my head. The lies. The manipulation. The way she laughed with him while warning me not to cheat. As if I were the one sneaking around in hotel robes and slipping into another man's bed. That kind of hypocrisy? It carves deep. But this time, I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to scream or plead or beg. No, my silence would be louder than any outburst. I drove straight home from the airport. When I stepped inside, the house felt cold and unfamiliar. Her scent lingered faintly in the hallway, but her presence no longer felt real. I stood there for a few minutes, just listening to the stillness. Then, I went to work. I packed quietly and methodically. Clothes, personal documents, my watches. I left behind the wedding photos, every last one. Let her stare at the empty frames on the wall and wonder when it all unraveled. I moved my belongings into a furnished apartment on the other side of town, a place she'd never been. No photos, no memories, just space, peaceful, undisturbed space. That Thursday, I called my lawyer. He had the divorce packet ready by Friday morning. I reviewed everything twice, then added the photos, the printed texts, and a flash drive with all the recordings. Bulletproof evidence. No wiggle room. No denial. But I didn't deliver them right away. I wanted her to come home first. I wanted her to see what she lost. I spent Friday night in my new place, alone, phone on silent. She tried calling again, 3 times, back to back, but I didn't pick up. The messages were exactly what you'd expect. "Jeff, where are you? I'm worried. Please call me. I miss you. I need to talk to you." Her desperation was just starting to bleed through the cracks. Perfect. Saturday morning came, and right around noon, I got a text from Carlos at the hotel. They checked out. She got the envelope. Her face? Priceless. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I drove over to her parents' house. Cheryl answered the door. Her mother, always gracious, always kind. But even she looked shaken. She's upstairs, she said. She's not doing well. I just came to drop something off, I said, handing her the envelope with the divorce papers. She looked at it, then at me, as if trying to understand how we got here. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, Jeff. I had no idea. I believe you. She stepped aside to let me in, but I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. I turned and walked back to the car. But just as I opened the door, I heard her. Jeff. I turned around slowly. Sophia was standing on the porch, hair a mess, eyes swollen, wearing one of my old hoodies like it might protect her from what was coming. You were there, she said, breathless. You were in Miami. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, frantic now. You left the envelope at the front desk. The photos, the note. It was you. Still, I stayed silent. Tears welled in her eyes. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you talk to me? Talk. I finally said, voice low. You mean like the conversations you had with Beckman behind my back? Or the one where you called me doofus while wrapped up in his arms? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I made a mistake, she choked. A terrible, stupid mistake. You made 6 months of mistakes, Sophia, I said, stepping closer. This wasn't one night. This wasn't a drunken accident. You planned a week-long affair. You had a system. I thought you didn't care anymore, she whimpered. I laughed bitterly. You thought I didn't care? I watched you sleep every morning. I kissed your forehead before work. I imagined growing old with you. That's what not caring looks like. She couldn't meet my eyes. I loved you, I said, voice breaking. God help me. I loved you more than anything. But now, all I feel when I look at you is regret. She took a step forward, reaching out, but I backed away. No, I said firmly. You don't get to cry your way out of this. You don't get to burn down our life and ask for a second chance while the ashes are still smoldering. Please, Jeff, just let me explain. You don't need to explain, I said. I heard everything. I saw everything. I know everything. She fell silent. Divorce papers are in the envelope, I added. You'll find copies of the evidence. I'm not asking for anything but my freedom. I turned and opened the car door. She just stood there, shaking, sobbing, the wind carrying her guilt back toward the house she once called home. As I started the engine, I looked at her one last time. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, I said quietly. But now, you're just the biggest mistake I ever loved. And then I drove away, without looking back. It's strange how quiet the world gets when you finally walk away from the noise. For days after I handed Sophia those divorce papers, everything felt still, like life had been screaming in my ears for months, and someone had finally pulled the plug. No more lies. No more pretending. No more watching the woman I loved become a stranger. I moved through the motions, eating, working, sleeping, but inside, I was on autopilot. The hurt didn't hit like a slap. It settled in like fog. Heavy, lingering, unshakable. The apartment I'd rented wasn't much. A 2-bedroom overlooking a parking lot. Beige walls, outdated fixtures. But it had something our house hadn't in months. Peace. I kept the windows open and the lights dim. I didn't want beauty. I wanted simplicity. Clarity. That Sunday, I got a call from Sophia's father, Mr. Lawson. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Ryan, I'm sorry to intrude, he said, his voice trembling. But Sophia, she's not doing well. She's barely eating. She won't talk to her mother. She's been locked in her old room since you left. I didn't say anything. I'm not asking you to come back. She needs closure. She needs to understand. She had 6 months to think about what she was doing. I finally said. She didn't need closure then. I know, he whispered. But I'm her father. I'm desperate. I sighed. Let her be desperate. Maybe it'll teach her something. I hung up. That night, I sat on the balcony, a bourbon in hand, watching the headlights trail across the asphalt. I should have felt vindicated. Powerful even. I'd exposed her. Humiliated Beckman. Walked away with my dignity intact. But all I felt was hollow. I missed who she used to be. The way she used to rest her head on my shoulder during thunderstorms. The way she used to laugh at the dumbest jokes I told. The way she used to look at me like I was the only man in the world. I missed the ghost of the woman I married. But ghosts don't come back. Not really. That Monday, I took the day off work and drove to my parents' place. They'd been worried about me since the divorce papers hit Sophia's doorstep. I hadn't returned their calls. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't know what to say. My mom opened the door and pulled me into the kind of hug only mothers can give. I heard, she whispered. I'm so sorry. My dad clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did what you had to do, son. We're proud of you. We sat at the kitchen table like old times, coffee in front of us, the sound of a clock ticking on the wall. I told them everything. Miami, the hotel, the recordings. My mother cried. My father swore under his breath. But they listened. They didn't judge. She never deserved you, Mom finally said. I think she did, I replied. Once. But she gave that version of herself to someone else. That night, I stayed in my childhood bedroom, staring at the same ceiling I used to dream under. It felt poetic, in a way, coming full circle. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. We went over the terms. Clean split. No alimony. No shared assets aside from the house. I didn't want the house. Let her live in it, surrounded by the memories she shattered. But I made one thing clear. I wanted full control over the story. I wasn't going to be the villain in some twisted version of events where I was the cold, distant husband and Beckman was her shoulder to cry on. I gave my lawyer the recordings, the transcripts, the texts, the video footage. He nodded solemnly. This is airtight, he said. You could ruin her if you wanted. I don't want to ruin her, I said. I want her to live with what she did. Because that's the thing about betrayal, it echoes. Long after the affair ends, long after the apologies dry up, long after the divorce papers are signed, the guilt lingers. And guilt is a prison far worse than anything I could design. That night, Sophia called me again. I didn't pick up. Instead, I saved her voicemail and filed it away with the rest of her broken promises. She wanted forgiveness. But forgiveness has to be earned. And she hadn't even started trying. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she finally showed up at my door. I was on the couch, half watching a documentary about shipwrecks, seemed oddly fitting when the knock came. 3 soft taps. Hesitant. Almost apologetic. I knew it was her before I even stood up. Sophia. I opened the door, and there she was. Hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes red like she hadn't slept in days. She wore one of my old college sweatshirts. The one she always stole when she was cold. I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside. She walked in like a ghost revisiting the scene of her own crime. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the simplicity, the absence of her. It was like watching someone realize they'd been written out of their own story. I didn't know where else to go, she said softly. I'm surprised you came at all. She winced at that. I didn't come to beg, Ryan. I wanted to talk. One last time. I motioned toward the dining table. She sat across from me, fingers trembling around the mug of coffee I set in front of her. I stayed quiet, letting the silence build. If she had something to say, she'd have to dig for the courage to say it. I don't even know where to start, she whispered, eyes fixed on the steam rising from the cup. Try the truth. You skipped that part for most of our marriage. She looked up, pain flickering across her face. I never stopped loving you. I scoffed. You don't cheat on someone you love. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I'd seen those tears before. In the mirror. In the bathroom sink after I played her voicemails. In the middle of the night, when the reality finally broke me. Ryan. I was stupid. I let the excitement of something new fool me into thinking I was missing out. Beckman made me feel seen. At least, that's what I told myself. But he was nothing more than a distraction. And the second I lost you, I realized how empty it all was. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Did you feel empty when he kissed you at the hotel pool? Or when you let him touch you in public like you weren't married? Did you feel empty when you called me a doofus while laughing with him? She looked down, her hands gripping the mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I felt powerful, in control, like I wasn't just someone's wife, but someone who could still be wanted. And now I just feel pathetic. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to hold on to that anger like armor. But in that moment, she looked less like a villain and more like a woman who had lost everything because she thought she deserved more. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. But I need you to know, I never meant to destroy us. I just didn't know how to handle the comfort of someone who actually loved me. That's the most twisted thing I've ever heard, I said flatly. Her shoulders shook, but she held back the sob. I don't want you to take me back. I just want you to believe that I regret it. Every second of it. I left the man who would have done anything for me for a man who wouldn't even return my calls after everything fell apart. Where is he now? Back with his wife. Apparently, she forgave him. She said he was weak, not evil. I guess I don't inspire that kind of grace. I laughed bitterly. You burned the bridge, and now you're surprised no one's waiting on the other side. Silence fell again. But this one wasn't heavy. It was freeing. I'm leaving town, she said. Moving in with my sister in Vermont. I can't stay here. Every corner of this city feels like a memory I ruined. I nodded. Then go. Start over. Just don't carry your lies into the next chapter. She stood slowly, wiping her cheeks. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Ryan. I just realized it too late. As she walked to the door, she turned once more. If there's ever a time you need anything, even just closure, you can call me. I already got my closure, I said, eyes locked on hers. It came the day I realized I deserve more than someone who only remembers my worth after they've thrown it away. She opened the door, nodded once, and left. No dramatic goodbye. No final plea. Just silence. And this time, it didn't hurt. After Sophia walked out that final time, the silence she left behind was different. It didn't echo with pain anymore. It was peaceful. Still, like the storm had passed, and all that remained was the debris waiting to be cleared. I didn't cry. I didn't chase her. I just stood there, hand on the doorknob, breathing in the weight of what had finally ended. A decade of memories, of routines, of compromises and sacrifices, reduced to a simple goodbye and the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. The next morning, I got up before sunrise and took a walk down to the pier near the old marina. The same spot where Sophia and I used to go when we were dating, back when life felt like possibility instead of a prison sentence. The wind was cold, biting, but it helped. It reminded me I was still alive. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my lawyer. Proceed with the divorce. No alimony. No reconciliation talks. Just make it clean. I hit send without hesitation. It was time to sever the last tie. That same afternoon, I picked up the envelope I'd been saving for weeks. Inside were photos, transcripts, even a copy of the hotel receipt, everything I'd gathered. I dropped it in a FedEx envelope and addressed it to Sophia's parents. No note. No explanation. Just the truth. If she had any shred of honesty left in her, she'd explain it to them herself. 3 days later, I got a call from Derek Lawson's wife, Melissa. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, her voice trembling. You saved me years of pretending. I confronted him with the evidence you sent. He confessed. He's gone now. I'm sorry, I said quietly. No, don't be. You did the right thing. We both deserved better than what they gave us. After that, I blocked her number. Not out of anger. Just closure. I didn't need any more connections to that chapter. I focused on rebuilding. I poured myself into work, accepted a long overdue promotion, and started working out again. Not for revenge. Not for some dramatic glow-up. Just for me. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. But perhaps the most unexpected part of this journey was Jody. She worked at Family Services, and we'd crossed paths a few times during my filing process. Sharp, kind, with a quiet strength in her eyes. She didn't pry, didn't pity me. She just listened. One day, after yet another late paperwork session, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We talked for hours. No expectations. No judgment. Just two people who had been broken by others and were slowly figuring out how to feel whole again. One evening, as we sat on my porch, she said something that stuck with me. You know what I see when I look at you, Ryan? Not a man who got cheated on. Not someone bitter. I see someone who made it through the fire and came out stronger. I looked at her, the fading sunlight casting a soft glow on her face, and for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Sophia did call again. Once. It was around midnight, maybe a week before the divorce finalized. Hey, she said. I just wanted to know how you're doing. I'm doing better, I replied. Long pause. Do you ever think about us? Not really, I said honestly. I think about who we used to be, but I don't miss it. Not anymore. She was quiet. Then, softly, I hope you find happiness, Ryan. Real happiness. I already did, I replied. It started the day I let you go. Click. That was the last time we spoke. It's been a year now. The divorce is old news. My life is simpler, lighter. I still pass the old restaurant we used to visit, still hear songs that remind me of her. But they don't hurt like they used to. They're just echoes, memories of a man I used to be, loving someone who never truly saw him. Jody and I are still taking it slow. No grand declarations. No pressure. Just two people walking side by side, one step at a time. And if there's anything I've learned from all this, it's that love isn't measured by passion or promises. It's measured by presence, loyalty, the little, quiet choices we make every day to stand beside the people we claim to care about. Sophia chose thrill over truth. I choose peace. And this time, I'm not letting go of it. Not for anyone. Looking back now, with the dust settled and my heart a little steadier, I realized there were lessons in the wreckage. Lessons I wish I didn't have to learn the hard way. But maybe that's how life works. Sometimes it breaks you to teach you how to rebuild. The first truth? Never ignore your instincts. If something feels off, it usually is. I spent too long doubting myself, convincing myself to trust blindly when what I needed was to trust my own eyes and gut. Second, forgiveness isn't weakness, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your dignity. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt is admirable, but giving them endless chances to betray you? That's self-destruction. To anyone listening, especially those who've lived long enough to know love and loss, guard your peace. It's the most valuable thing you have. And if someone threatens that peace, no matter how much history you share, it's okay to walk away. Healing doesn't come from revenge or bitterness. It comes from choosing yourself, from rising in the quiet, steady truth that you deserve better and finally believing it.